Hey guys, Happy New Year. Just wanted to thank you all. May 2025 be a prosperous and abundance of joy with gratefulness and a great year as we build on positive proceeds, lead with an altruistic mindset. Now, in today's video, I wanted to cover all three commodities. I'd like to talk about the overall forecast for price of Bitcoin. How far are we going with MicroStrategy? Most of you are wondering, is now a good time to continue buying, holding, or even selling? How far will this drop continue, or will we expect a V-shape back up, especially with the price of MSTR fluctuating so much in the last couple of days and weeks of trading? And we'll also talk about the big three Bitcoin miners. What is the value of these three Bitcoin miners? Is there potential for it to outperform given that the year 2024 was a huge lagging year, especially for the Bitcoin mining sector? Now, if you're new to this channel, I mean, just starting off with the new year, I would really appreciate you guys if you can show some love, support with the subscribe and like this content. My goal is to really continue to add value to this community and continue to expand and show some love, not only to the audience, but if you all can support, I would really appreciate that as well. Now, let's get started, guys. First off, I wanted to just go through the overall technicals of the price of Bitcoin. So, what we're looking at is the trend chart of Bitcoin. So, I have the green line here set at the resistance point of 120,000. So, we know that back in December 16, about 2 weeks ago, we reached that all-time high of $108,600. And then since then, it's been hitting that low point, getting to that, that 90,000 threshold. However, it hasn't reached sub 90,000 threshold. However, we zoom in here, we can see that now price of Bitcoin is reaching at that intersection point of the Ichimoku cloud. Now, think of the Ichimoku cloud as like the gravitational pull down. If the price gets in between that cloud, think of it as dragging down that airplane, and the airplane can start sinking down further. However, given that we're right at that above point of the Ichimoku cloud, we haven't got a huge gravitational pull down yet. But I think that with the current support level here, I have it set at 88,000. Whether the continue consolidation downward descending resistance will continue getting that support level, lower lows here. I have it set at 88,000. Who knows? We may even go down further below that, but I think that come the upcoming events with like the inauguration January 20th, which is 20 days from now, I think that the price of Bitcoin will start appreciating up, especially once Trump becomes elected, getting into the White House as the official day one, January 20th. I think that the price of Bitcoin will start appreciating. And just with the couple of weeks, I have the price target of Bitcoin, by February or even earlier, it's going to break through that $120,000. In fact, current state price of Bitcoin is hovering around the 94,000 right now. So that's looking good, positive as we head into the new year. Now, also just to back up my overall price forecast of Bitcoin. So here we're looking at the Bitcoin Rainbow price chart indicator. Where we currently are right now, we just passed the, current state, the buy zone. We're at the accumulate state. It's still cheap. And then eventually we're going to start cycling into like the yellow, orange, dark orange, and then red range where it's currently still cheap. It's going to get into that HODL range. FOMO intensifies. Is this a bubble? Then, we start thinking about, hey, is it time to sell? Maximum bubble territory, which is what we've seen with the historical Bitcoin bull cycles with the last couple of years here. So I think that because we're in this accumulation buy zone, we're still early in the cycle, given the fact that we had that halving that took place in April. You can see the halvings from the prior events, post 2020, post 2016. You see, a duration of time before Bitcoin price started ramping up. Duration of time here, you can see 2016 post that having for it to run up, consistent with the post 2012 having. It took some time for it to run up, and that's expected because of, supply and demand. Now, on top of that, we have game theory. Countries are trying to load the boat with Bitcoin reserve. I think all of this is really going to come into play, especially with the unique variable of ETFs that came into play. So you have companies like Vanguard creating ETFs, like IBIT ETFs that really just solidifies Bitcoin. It's not going away. There's a limited supply. People are just going to continue either getting more Bitcoin or even leveraging that through ETFs or other plays like MicroStrategy and even the miners. We'll talk about that. But I think there's so much sentiment right now, especially with the race of Bitcoin. The United States has about 500 Bitcoins. China has like less than US, but they're very close. So it's a race, right? Because whoever has the most Bitcoin would be viewed as a strongest country. So I think that's why the United States, with Donald Trump's leadership, he's really trying to create that disparity to hodl as much Bitcoin as possible. And I think that's really going to benefit unique companies like MSTR, the Titan of Bitcoin, as well as the Bitcoin miners. So let's take a look here at the technicals of MSTR. So we know that back in November 20th, it ran up all the way to mid $550. 2024 MSTR outperformed a number of stocks. In fact, most stocks in the S&P, even in the Nasdaq 100. I mean, this was the leading workhorse in 2024. We also saw that in 2023 as well, but not at the same level of 2024, at that cap point of like November. However, just with, the post weeks after November 2021, we had Citron shorting MSTR, and that's really caused a lot of people to take profits. I mean, at that point, it's extremely overvalued from a technical analysis. Relative strength index was like above 70, indicators that MSTR is overbought. However, from a fundamental perspective, the fact that MSTR every Monday throughout the week has been consistently increasing their HODL, now close to about 500,000 in Bitcoin reserve, close to 500,000. I think there's going to be some partnership between MSTR and the miners, partnering up with the government, where the government will provide incentives for Bitcoin reserve, even for energy. So I think that's going to be very interesting as we head into the new year. But just looking at it from a technicals analysis, the fact that MSTR ran all the way up to 550. We see current price range at the sub 300 after the course of that recent run up. And I was explaining, like what goes up very quickly can go down very quickly. So what I forecasted is expected, and I think that's normal. No stock can just run up significantly up and just keep running up. There's no way for you to continue breathing. But I think that MSTR is taking a breather. Now, most of you are wondering, is now a good time to dollar cost average down? How far can it go down? I'm forecasting that this is all really dependent. So if MSTR has that V shape up from this price point of 289, that's really dependent on the price of Bitcoin here. So I think just following this trajectory, MSTR can go up if we follow this pattern of Bitcoin going up to 120K in Q1 of 2024, hopefully sooner rather than later, because if Bitcoin just continues to consolidate at the 95,000 or lower, I think the shorts are going to continue taking advantage of trying to pull down the stock price here. So I think because we're seeing this continued lowering point of MSTR, the lowest point that I can see potentially is $220. However, it's not to say that it'll reach the 220, but I think that there's that possibility. But let's say if Bitcoin starts to run very soon, then we're gonna see that potential V shape up. So it's really difficult time the market, determine whether MSTR will continue going down. The fact that it's dropped by close to about 50% from its high point already. So I think it's dropped enough, but it still can drop. It's really dependent on the price of Bitcoin running up. And once it runs up, I think that we can see that, that definite retest going up to retest that 550 zone. And then I think in 2025, sometime during the year, we can see that next gap up into the 600 zone. Just because MSTR, from a fundamental standpoint right now, I mean, with the US Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, MSTR is the king right now, hodling so much Bitcoin. But then as you think about increasing your shares, that's the contrarian perspective as to whether MSTR will outperform in 2025, given the fact that it outperformed in the last 2 years, 2023 and 2024. Let's take a look at this article here. So, uh, we do realize that, MSTR is at 46% below its 52-week high of $543, but overall still at like 400% gain performance in the year 2024. At one point in November, it was at 800%. But just based on the details of this here, I mean, this article is indicating that it's detected warning signs with MSTR being significantly overvalued, and that's expected. However, the fact that it's dropped by 46%, that run up of 800%, think of it as cutting that into half, where now it's at like at a 400% run up. But when you think about the 2023 run up with about 300%, including the 400% gain in 2024. MSTR is doing really well, I mean, for the last 2 years. So I think that the shorters will continue to take advantage, but I think in order for MSTR to really have that V-shape back up, consolidate V-shape back up, is really dependent on the price of Bitcoin appreciating. So I think because Bitcoin is still in that accumulation phase, there's hope here for MSTR to really bounce back and make a run here. So I think there may be a FOMO effect that will kick in with MSTR. Overall, I mean, just price forecasts. I think what analysts are suggesting is an average price target of $424 with the low estimate of $187. That has that upside of like 46%, but I think that's on a conservative level. From when you scale out 424, I do think that's definitely achievable. Let's take a look at the overall performance of the miners. So here I have the big three miners here, and when I say the big three, what I'm referring to is that these miners have an established HODL account, meaning they have the most Bitcoin on their balance sheet, as well as them being the highest miners in terms of its capacity. They can mine the most Bitcoins per day. So Mara mines, about over 900 Bitcoins per month. CleanSpark, they announced last month that they mine over 600 Bitcoins per month. And Riot, they have been consistently producing about 500 Bitcoins per month. Given the fact that now the fleet efficiency hash rate has increased, we do expect that the mining capacity will only increase, with the understanding that, yes, with the post-halving event that took place in April, that increased the difficulty of mining, which is why we see the overall share price dropping from April to now to September. You see here in purple, Riot. I mean, it was down 58% since that April halving. So a lot of shorters took advantage of that halving event, which is routine throughout the cycles that we've seen pre and post halving. Looking at Mara, I mean, Mara at that point, September from the halving event was 42% down. CleanSpark, 24% down. Although we did see CleanSpark outperform in Q1 of 2024, but it's been just on a downward trajectory. But as we look at the overall year to date here, Riot down the most here at minus 33%, Mara 27%, CleanSpark 15%. Because we see this underperformance in the year 2024, I think that as we just look at seasonality assessments here, let's just take a look at Mara, for example. But overall, CleanSpark, Riot have the similar seasonality performance. So what we see in Mara will likely be consistent with the performance of CleanSpark and Riot as well, because these stocks are correlated with one another, although one can perform slightly better than the other one. 2020 is the earliest year that we're looking at here. So 2020 was a year where we saw a huge vertical rocket fuel launch from like Mara, right? It was like single digits. It ran all the way up to $80. But what happened the following year, 2021? It significantly went down, although it still outperformed. So big disparity from the year over year performance. But what happened after 2021, after those huge gains? 2022, it flushed out all of those gains here. And I know there's been people who are still holding and they lost basically all of their gains the year 2022 because that year was so bad. There is that opposite effect of 2023 being a positive year, outperformance of 2023. However, what was outperformed that good positive gains in that year, it got flushed out by 2024's years by even a third here. So because we're at an underperformance year in 2024, not to say that it was a big underperformance compared to 2022, I think that we will likely see 2025 be within the green and red zone performance. So anywhere less than 600%, anywhere above 200% gains for the miners. That's my assessment based on seasonality. And we look at seasonality to get a gauge if there are repeating trends occurring on an annual basis. And we don't typically see consistent repeating trends. It's all across the board here. And because 2024 was an underperforming year, it's likely to see 2025 to be an outperforming year for these miners. So just overall, just looking at scaling in here, just zooming in from a month perspective, CleanSpark just took a big drop in its share price, close to 40%, along with Mara, Riot as well. Because of this, I think what goes down very quickly is going to go up very quickly, similar to what we saw with MSTR. What goes up very quickly can go down very quickly, but in reverse of what we saw with the miners, along with what we saw with MSTR, what goes down very quickly, which we saw like in the last 5 weeks of trading, can potentially bounce back. The unique thing is that MSTR has been outperforming them, but overall the miners have been just consistently underperforming throughout the year. So I do think that overall, because the price of Bitcoin is going to appreciate above that $100,000, I do think that miners have that potential as well as MSTR heading into the new year. But most of you are wondering between Bitcoin, MSTR, and the miners, which has the most upside. And if I were to put my money on it, because I see this huge seasonality disparity with miners year over year, I like that analysis and I will place my hedge on the miners. Not to say that MSTR won't outperform. I do think that there's huge upside, but because they significantly ran up in 2023, 2024, the potential upside, although it's still there, it's less of a potential than what we see in like the miners. And for Bitcoin, I do think that, there's also potential upside as well. I mean, the demand is only going to increase. However, I do think that in terms of percentage gain, appreciation may come more for the miners, which is why I would, hedge more towards the miners, even though we had such a bad year of 2024. But here's an opportunity to dollar cost average down. I'd like to hear what your comments, questions are. What are you most bullish on between Bitcoin, MSTR, and the miners? Thanks for watching, guys, and Happy New Year. Please make sure to subscribe. I really appreciate it. Thank you.